All right, then. Hello, YouTube. Raids are back. And so are Convergences, as it turns out. So let's go ahead and get into it. We are less than a month away from the launch of Janthir Wilds, and while there's plenty to be excited about for the August 20th release, players can also look forward to the newest raid and convergence going live in our first major update in November. Yeah, bear in mind, the raid and Convergences are not on the launch of the expansion. Bit unfortunate if you ask me. You know, I'd love to have that there as well. But, you know, you can't have everything, right? You can't have everything in one go. That would just make, you know, that would make no sense. Look, we can complain about having a bit more on launch at a later date. We're not going to get derailed into that today. Again, I feel like I get derailed in every news segment about that, but not today. You will be able to explore a mysterious mountain region. And as you ascend the mountain, you'll face off against opponents who won't go down without a fight. Players will also get to choose how to encounter these fights in either a 50-player convergence event or a 10-player raid wing. Our first new raid in 5 years. It's been a while, hasn't it? It absolutely has. Yeah, I really like this approach here as well. And we kind of talked about this a little bit in the developer interview that we had the other day, actually. But yeah, the big issue that they're trying to solve here is raiding accessibility. Raids are just not accessible in Guild Wars 2 because there's no difficulty setting, right? Like, you only have one stage of difficulty, and that means all players get lumped in together. And honestly, it doesn't work out well. It really, really doesn't. Having this entry point for new players, I think, is essential in kind of allowing these fights to be accessible to essentially as many players as possible. So this is definitely a design that I'm really looking forward to. I also really like the idea to go with a 50-player version, basically. I would have preferred it if it was fully open world, to be honest, like an actual open world map that was like the story of the raid, basically. Or in other words, like the raid would have been like a different version of the open world map to an extent. Like, that would have been really, really cool, and maybe they'll consider that approach in the future. But I think this is good too. To be honest, like, one thing that I do really like about stuff like Dragon's End and Dragon's End, like the big meta events, is, of course, that you get to include more people, right? Of course, like, when I play a raid, I can only play with 10 people, right? But I can bring a huge amount of gamers for something like a convergence, and we can get loads of different maps going, all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I really do remember how exciting it was going into a new Guild Wars 2 expansion, and, you know, everyone's there. Like, everyone from the community is working together. There's loads of people playing together, loads of different squads and commanders going and all trying to complete the map at the same time. So I think that's actually going to be a really exciting part of the expansion. I'm really looking forward to this in particular, actually, like having that open world experience alongside that raid experience too. Our team is currently hard at work developing this new raid. So while we can't share all the details yet, we can provide an overview of what to expect and explain why we're reintroducing raids, along with some insight into what players can hope for in the future. Oh, we're looking deep, huh? And here's the mountain. There you go, guys. Of course, they're not giving much away here. And yeah, I think we will probably hear a lot more closer to release. I hope they hype this up. This is a big deal, right? This is a big deal. Like, right now, we're getting the classic, oh, they're going to show us a picture of a rock to hype up their expansion. But you know what? To be clear, I don't entirely fault them for that right now, because this stuff is obviously in development, right? Like, it's essentially, you know, 4 months away before this is coming out. So it's probably not finalized, right? There's probably a lot of work to do. And as we've seen from stuff like the weapon beta that they do, the spear beta, for example, like, there's probably a whole bunch of, like, placeholder stuff going on. So I don't blame them for not showing that off. I think we can give them a little bit of hell if they don't hype this up, because this is a big deal, right? Like, you know, the Wing 8, the return of raids, everyone's, I think, definitely anticipating this, and I think it's a big deal for the game, right? It's a significant thing to be adding, a significant step that the developers are taking here in reintroducing a system like this back into the game, right? We went to strike missions, then, you know, that didn't exactly work out super well. We're going back to raids. It definitely is a bit of a gamble, I think, but I think it's an intelligent guess, an intelligent gamble, especially with the addition of that open world mode. But let's see what they've got to say about this. The return of raiding. In the past, raids were self-contained instances with their own stories built for 10-player groups. Our goal with the upcoming raid is to allow players to experience the story in a way that works best for them. The raid will be integrated into the main storyline, and players who might be hesitant to join a raid group will be able to enjoy their own personal narrative. The 50-player version is built as a convergence, similar in the structure to those found in Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure. So actually, there's actually a lot going on here. This sounds actually better than I was expecting, actually, in terms of how they've done this. So it seems that the raid is going to be in the story, so you'll play through it as in the single-player experience, right? Within the main story. It's going to be part of that main storyline, so we get it. It's going to be the same story, but told in different ways. Across the board, actually. So you can play it as a solo player, you can play it as a convergence, and you can play it as a 10-player raid for all those 3 bosses. And of course, we have the challenge mode and legendary modes coming up a little bit later. Those participating in the 10-player raid will find the story to be more heroic, with a focus on the formidable enemies they face rather than the NPCs involved in the narrative. So, what to be clear, what they're saying here is that they're kind of cutting out the dialogue, right? They're not going to have all of the story dialogue in the raid, and I think that makes sense. Of course, the bosses, I think, are still going to be showing up in the story, but what's going to be happening here is that you aren't going to have to listen to the entire story every single time you play the raid. That's what they're getting at here, right? So it's going to be like all about getting it done, right? Like, let's get in there, let's just pump the bosses down, right? Rather than like listening to the bears talk to you for half an hour, right? So that's probably a good call, I'd say. While there be some differences between the 50-player and 10-player versions, the team has recognized the importance of maintaining a sense of continuity between both experience. We look forward to watching players discover and master these mechanics in each setting. And yeah, that's something that, again, we did talk about, and I'd highly check this out. We had a fantastic interview with Brian Yarrow and, of course, our very own CMCH, and we talked a little bit about the raid and convergences and all that kind of stuff, and we got into a couple of these. I'd highly recommend checking that out. It's going to be on the channel pretty soon, so stay tuned for that one as well. And this makes sense, and this is actually a good sign to me, the fact that they're kind of designing it around it. Like, you can't really have a green circle that people have to stand in, and if you don't, it wipes the entire group in a 50-player raid. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's got to be a lot more about coordination, right? It's got to be like, okay, you need to split up into 2 groups, you got to go here, you got to kill the 2 bosses at the same time, or something like that, right? Like, it's that type of mechanic. Like, the 50-player raid is almost certainly going to be focused on surviving, coordination, right? Like working as a team, and less about these kind of puzzle-oriented mechanics that you'd expect from a raid, you know? Stuff like green circles, or, oh, don't stand there, or you get everyone instantly dies. Like, no, like, white mechanics. There's not going to be, like, white mechanics, right? With all that kind of stuff. We look forward to watching players discover and master these mechanics in each setting. With the introduction of our new raiding calendar, some of you might be wondering if we will continue to create raids in the future. Ooh, that's a big question. The short answer is maybe. Raids require a significant amount of development resources, but only a small subset of players engage with the 10-player group instance content, which is part of the reason it's been 5 years since our last one. The new raid serves as a test to see how we can support raids moving forwards. So yeah, this is actually what I expected. And I think, again, I'm on record saying I did not think Wing 8 was very likely whatsoever, and this is why. Because, yeah, people don't do this stuff, and I think that this is very much an experimental thing. Like, there's some data actually posted to the subreddit quite recently about the engagement level on strike missions. It's not super hot, if we're being honest, and I think that that's why we're seeing this, because I think ArenaNet really want to maintain 10-player content in the same way that they want to maintain fractals, right? Like, Guild Wars 2, it is an open-world game, but it's also an MMO, and people expect certain things. People expect dungeons. People expect some kind of raiding content, right? And Guild Wars 2 certainly is a game that tries to have something for everyone, right? And I think that's what they're really trying to do here. They're trying to find a version of this, a refinement of this that is going to work for a large amount of the player base, so that they can actually, develop this, right? They can continue to develop this challenging content while also making it integrated into the story and accessible for players of all kind of experience levels and all just, likes and dislikes, right? Like what players are looking for, what type of experience that players are looking for. If to give my opinion on this, I've talked about this a little bit already. I guess a very intelligent development strategy here. If this doesn't do it, I'm going real, guys. If this doesn't do it, we're doomed. To be honest, it ain't looking good. I think there are some changes that, and I'd actually really like to hear them talk about this. Actually, I'd love to hear about stuff like making raids have daily rewards, not just weekly. I think one of the really big problems that raids in particular face right now, as opposed to Icebrood Saga Strikes in particular, is that raids are a weekly lockout. So what happens a lot of the time is that raids are super active on Monday, right? And then the activity drops off a cliff throughout the week as people get their weekly clear and they don't come back. They tried to fix it with the kind of like the daily strike system that they added, but I'm not gonna lie, it's not great. The rewards are pretty mediocre. I actually think that making, repeating this content, kind of like Convergences, right, on a daily basis, I think it should probably be pretty good, and incentivize players to do that. And that's not me saying, oh, I just want to get rich farming raids. It also means that players are going to make groups, right? That they'll make groups for raids every single day. Because, like, trust me, people who like raids in this game, oh yeah, they like raids. They grind raids like hell, even if there aren't any rewards. But if you incentivize players to actually do this, they're going to want to keep doing it. They're going to keep farming raids, going crazy, and just creating more groups, and that makes the entire scene a lot more accessible. So I'd actually love to hear their thoughts on kind of reward structures for this stuff, and how like all the resets work and so on, because I think that actually is another concern. Like, we have the accessibility concern, I think we also have the reward structure concern as well. And I think that is something that did plague strike missions in particular, actually, as well. Like, kind of having this like weird semi-daily, semi-weekly reset. It's like the issues with raids, it's not one thing. It's not just the LFG being a bit scuffed. It's not just the weekly reset. It's not just the accessibility. It is an amalgamation of all of these things. And I do think that ArenaNet needs to address some of these topics if they want to actually make raiding a thing in this game, right? If they continue to develop this. Like, it's not just going to be a simple fix. Like, oh yeah, we'll just make different versions of it. There are other issues that also need to be solved as well. Originally, we attempted to solve the cost problem with raids through strike missions, a new game mode designed to be a bridge between players and raids. This time, instead of trying to give players bridge content in the hope that it leads into the raids, we're just giving them the raid content from the start in the form of those interested really want. Oh my god! Wow! Guys, no shot. ArenaNet figured out what literally every single other MMO was doing since day one. Yeah! Yes! The bridge sucks. It's not a good idea. It never was. It just doesn't make sense. You're essentially reducing the amount of content that appeals to players at different skill levels because, like, you know, essentially you kind of almost like outgrow content to an extent, and most of it isn't accessible to players who don't want to keep climbing up the ladder, right, of difficulty settings, right? For that. And it's just not a good idea. It's just not a good idea, and it reduces the total amount of content in the game, right? If you have difficulty settings, every encounter stays relevant to all players, and it's fun and engaging and accessible for all players. The bridge idea isn't good, especially considering that parts of the bridge are locked to different expansions as well, and they're not in order, by the way, because it kind of goes like, if you were to do like a difficulty curve of all encounters in the game, you'd be like, dashing all over the place. Nope, wasn't a good idea. No, and I'm glad we've moved past that. It's a much better approach, actually. We love to see that. And that's a good point from the chat as well. I think that they started doing this a little bit in Soto, actually, kind of having some instance content mechanics like green circle and stuff popping up in the open world. Like, showing players these mechanics in the Convergences will kind of give them a bit of a leg up. You know, funnily enough, I think that in counter design and doing it this way, kind of having the same bosses and the same mechanics pop up a lot, not exactly the same, but like the same type of mechanics pop up, is actually the best way to bridge people, if you want to do that. So you can introduce them to these concepts before they actually are in that situation where they have to execute. It's very important. Players who want a 10-player instance mechanics-heavy version can play that, and the players who prefer a large-scale open-world experience with fewer barriers to entry can also experience the content that way. Wow, good idea. Meanwhile, integrating raid content into the story lets us fit in its development into our annual release schedule. We aim to extend story assets to support raids and gauge players' reactions to raids that have been integrated into the story. I actually think this is one of the really big pain points, actually, of raids in terms of accessibility, is that raids have stories attached to them, and players who don't raid and don't like raiding were not able to access it. And here's the thing. Raid players do like story as well. But I don't think raid players are going to go, oh, it's not a special story just for us, so it's no good. Like, no, I don't think so, actually. I think that players are looking for that immersion, that kind of lore experience as well in the raiding community. So I think this actually does very much suit both of these player bases, in my opinion. Sometime after the raid's release in November, its challenge mode will become available. Additionally, players participating in the 10-player raid can anticipate a legendary mode, offering a highly coveted purple title. Goodness me! Wow. How exciting is that? They're doing the legendary mode, guys. I want to hear some more details on that. And again, I think we're going to hear more of that, because bear in mind, challenge and legendary mode, that's even further away. That's not coming with the raid on launch. That's coming through the second quarterly release, right? So we're actually 7 months away from that. Again, I want to see ArenaNet hype this up. Come on, let's go. I want to see some content about this. I definitely want to see some hype. I want to see them, teasing us, saying, oh yeah, you guys are going to get farmed, right? Let's go. You know what I mean? Let's get some energy around this when that happens. But really cool idea. And, again, mistakes into miracles, right? With the, with the Saros bug. fantastic stuff. We do love to see that. And I actually will quickly respond to the point here. I do think raids having their own standalone side stories actually is really exciting. So I think that's actually a fair criticism there, Jockcock, actually. But I do think this is a fair compromise, in my opinion, regardless of that. But I actually do want to acknowledge that, because I do agree with that. Like, the raids having that ability to dash off from the main story and tell you something kind of crazy, like, you know, going into the Mystic Forge with Kadim, right? Or the Bastion of the Penitent, right? Before that was really relevant, of course. You have that time with Secrets of the Obscure. That was really fun. It was really fun to have that agility within the writing. And maybe, you know, things go really well. Maybe we can actually come back to that Sunday at some point, you know, in the far distant future. But for now, I think this is what we've got. That's what we got for raids. And again, I am expecting a lot more news than this. And again, definitely take a listen to the dev interview tea time that I did for a couple more little insights, little tidbits of info in that regard. But what's going up next here? Of course, we're talking about Convergences, and this is also going to be, again, that raid experience, but a little bit different. And I actually really like what they've done here. Check this out. The Coden cubs huddle closely around the villager's claw, their eyes wide with awe and excitement as he begins to recount a harrowing tale. It's a story of bravery and strategy, in which a band of 50 fearless Tyrians embarked on a daring mission as they ascended the mountain. As the tale unfolds, you take up the challenge in this encounter. You will find a strong ally in your Warclaw mount, which will aid in this new adventure. Yeah, so the Warclaw is going to be part of the Convergences. Like, I hope they make it more about the movement. Right, I don't want to be having to, like, use it to kill things, really. I'm okay with, like, using it to CC. I'll take that. But I want to be using my buttons to fight things. As long as it's all about jumping and climbing on stuff, that's hype, in my opinion. Can definitely be pretty cool. But I actually want to say that the concept here is actually really fun. I like this. So they've basically taken the extra effort to make it so that the convergence is almost, like, repeatable, and it makes sense in the lore. Because whenever you're playing this convergence, you're almost like taking part in this recreation of this past event, right? You're participating in the storytelling of the Coden, right? Like, and you're kind of entertaining all the cubs, right, as well. I think that's like a really fun, really sweet little kind of inbuilt immersion factor on, like, oh, how are we fighting this guy again? And I think that also gives them really cool creative license to kind of embellish it, right? Because, you know, it's, you know, the Claw is telling this story of bravery and heroism, right? And you know, yeah, it's almost a bit over the top, right? Like, it didn't happen quite like that in the story. That's why it's different, right? That's why it's different to how it happens in the story and how it happens in the raid, even, because it's a story. That's not what happened. It's the spin on it. It's a bit of an embellishment of what happened. And you know what? I actually really want to highlight this and give a lot of credit here. This is actually the type of touch that I really appreciate in game design and in storytelling, actually. I really like the decision to do this. Like, when you take something like a convergence or like a raid or a fractal and you give it a lore reason why you're doing it over and over again, just like Fractals of the Mists, I think that's actually really cool. Like, that whole fractal arc culminating in Shattered Observatory, where you find out that all of the fractals are like this infinite loop and none of the people in it are really real whatsoever. That's actually really interesting. I think that makes the game feel better, right? Like, because you know, the game is trying to convince you that it's real, and that's something that I really appreciate. So you know, I know people don't know me as much of a lore nerd, right? But I am an immersion nerd, and I think stuff like this is actually really cool. Very fun detail. I actually can't wait. I can't wait to see this. This is going to be fun. I think that's actually going to be really fun. Listen closely as the villager's claw weaves the narrative. Each encounter promises unexpected challenges and thrilling surprises. During your encounter with these enemies, you might observe a notable shift in difficulty. Oh yeah, here we go. Compared to what you experienced in Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure. We fine-tuned these bosses to present a more advanced challenge than in previous Convergences, necessitating coordinated efforts from all party members to secure victory. Yo! That is actually very hype. One of the things that I'm worried about with Janthir Wilds is a lack of meta event content, because we are, you know, the first map is going to be a bit more chill, a bit more cozy, right? You know, Amnoon, Grothmar, that kind of thing. So we have one big meta event potentially on launch, but it looks like they're actually going to be adding this stuff with Convergences as well. And nobody panic. They're not going to make it like mega hard, obviously, and I don't want it to be. Like, open world content should be, you know, doable, right? Very doable, I think, without having to do DPS, all this kind of crazy stuff. But I really like the fact that they're actually going to make the encounters have a bit more to them, right? Like, maybe a bit more like Umbriel, right? Rather than the Demon Knight. I think they've really taken feedback on this. I think that's really cool. And bear in mind, there are going to be challenge modes for this too. They're talking about the normal here. So the normal mode is probably going to be a bit more juiced up, a little bit spicier. And they're also going to do the challenge mode on top of that as well, which is going to take it further. And I think that's actually a really cool idea. This sounds exciting to me. Yeah, I have to say this does make me a little bit less concerned about kind of like the meta event content in Janthir Wilds. It's, again, this is why I really wish that some of the stuff was on launch as well, to have that like big hit of endgame stuff being added to the game on the launch of the expansion. But yeah, this just means that patch number 1, that first quarter release, is going to be a bit of a banger, guys. Like 3 months after release in November, we're going to get seriously juiced up, you know? Very cool. Looking forward to that. And again, when they're talking about this, they're not going to say everyone's got to do 30k DPS to do the boss. No. It's going to be something like Dragon's End. You know, oh, the tail's there. You've got to go kill the tail, right? Or break the bar. Or you've got to split into 2 groups to kill 2 mini bosses in an intermission, right? Like, it's going to be that kind of stuff. It's as opposed to Convergences now, which are kind of just stack on the boss and wallop it until it dies, with kind of the exception of Umbriel, I would say, who's got a bit more turn with the, you know, the teleportation red circles and the eye mechanic that you've got to not look at. So they're just going to go a bit further. I'm all for that. That sounds really exciting as well. And of course, I'm sure they'll do some tuning as well, right? They're not gonna, you know, they're not gonna, if it's like really hard on launch and people are getting absolutely broken by it, okay, then they're not gonna go too crazy. And they're obviously aware of the feedback that stuff like Epoch has and Umbriel as well. So nobody panic. ArenaNet are not gonna, you know, completely wreck us and, you know, ruin everyone. Nobody worry about that. It's gonna be okay, guys. It's gonna be fun. But actually, really looking forward to doing this on launch, actually. We're getting the squad together, okay? We're getting the lads. We're getting the boys together. We're going to be pumping. Pumper! Completing Convergences in Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds will award players with essences that can be used to craft legendary gear. And yes, these essences will be compatible with the legendary obsidian armor available in the Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, as well as the new legendary spear and legendary backpack. Ooh, so we can actually get grinding then, actually, as soon as we have that quarterly update then. Essences from Convergence will be rated to Rift Essences with 3 rarities to streamline the rewards. This is honestly a good call. I wish they would make it so essences weren't so inventory heavy. Like, I feel like they just fill up my inventory a lot and it makes me cry a little bit. But yeah, this is definitely a good call, actually. Keep Soto stuff relevant, of course, because you can funnel it into the new rewards and vice versa, right? This is going to essentially speed up getting legendary armor, by the way, in terms of the rifting, because of course now you have a double convergence you can do, and convergences are already insane, by the way, in terms of how quickly you can get your legendary armor from Soto. So having 2 of these is going to be very juiced, and I actually like the idea of just consolidating this. This is a good call. We've seen them do this a little bit with like the ancient coins over time, magnetite shards, and so on and so on and so on. So yeah, continuing to kind of consolidate down all these currencies is a very good call, actually, and kind of building reward structures and currencies that are evergreen, right? They're going to keep reusing them. Is a very good idea. And that seems to be where they're going with Convergences, by the way. I almost feel like they might want to rename these at some point because it sounds a bit weird. Like Convergence in Soto is like a mega rift, but now it's like a bear telling a story. They might have to come up with like some other name for it, maybe, because it looks like Convergences are turning into a new game mode, essentially. It's going to be this instance 50-player content. Basically a 50-player raid, which, by the way, I view as incredibly exciting. Many of you probably know I'm a big WoW Classic fan, actually. And one thing that I love about that game is 40-player raiding. Right? It's big, it's epic, it's a clown fiesta. And I think that's something that Guild Wars 2 can actually capture extremely well. It's why I like stuff like Triple Trouble and Dragon's End, Dragon's Stand, Chat Garrett, you know? You have that 50-player raid-style experience that I really hope to be captured here as well. Really cool. Big fan, actually. Big fan. Like, the only thing would be better if it was fully open world. You know, like, if it was actually, like, fully open with, like, an actual map that you can zone into and all that kind of stuff, but I guess this is convenient too, so you can make your own squad and get everyone in. And that's it. Oh, look at that. And look, maybe this is the scenario, guys. We've got this waterfall here. Maybe this is the bear telling the story. Oh my god. I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's pretty cute, isn't it? Look at that little bear. I do like bears, actually. Big fan of cuddly bears. I still have all of my bears from when I was a child. They're very nice. They're very high tier. Looks a bit like Paddington. You know what I'm saying, guys? It's also high-quality film, if you ask me. But guys, I hope you're ready to say that I'm converging! Ah! Because that's what we're going to be doing, guys, in Janthir Wilds. We hope you enjoy hearing about some of our post-launch content coming to Guild Wars 2, Janthir Wilds, The Breaker. We'll see you in Tyria. Pre-purchasing, they always say the pre-purchase at the end. It's like, I always get baited about it. I'm like, that's the end of the article. But no! Buy the game using my referral link. Listen, guys, if this hasn't sold you, then I don't know what will. We've got Convergences, we've got Raids, we've got Bears. What more do you want? But anyway, let me know what you guys think about this, of course. Leave your comments, subscribe, like the video, watch the Secrets of the Obscure review, watch the developer interview, watch every single video, hit the bell for notifications, buy the game using a referral link, watch the stream, follow all of my social media. Okay, give me money on Patreon. Just give me money everywhere, to be honest. Like, just slam it, guys. Like, slam it big time. We love to see them. But anyway, that's going to just about do it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Some really cool news here, I think. And ArenaNet, listen, I'm looking at you. I want to see more. Get me some hype streams. I want to see a hype trailer. Don't make me do it. Don't make me make a hype montage for you. Okay, make some hype montages for these bosses. Yes, let's go. I want some energy on this. Same with all the content, actually. More. I want to see some dev blogs. I want to see some dev interviews. I want to see big content, okay? Anyway, that's it. I'm out. YouTube, boom, we're done.